might not, but I'm going to do it. So now we are hypothetically live streaming. In fact, it appears YouTube has confirmed I am for reals live streaming. So welcome everybody back to the Next Level Nonprofit Video live stream. This is a channel where basically my whole mission is to save you time, cash, and sanity as we all pursue the next level in our nonprofit videos together. And that can mean a lot of things, but right now, with everyone isolated away and needing to connect over the internet, it usually means we're all navigating live streaming. And I've done a couple videos about live streaming. I threw out a couple of them last week. And the thing that's basically happened is I've ended up with so much remote video editing work that I haven't had time to put together videos for the channel because I've been so busy putting together videos for other churches and nonprofits and things. So to basically cheat my way out of having to edit, I've decided to do most of it live. And also that means we get to celebrate if I screw it up. So look forward to that. I have a bunch of stuff to talk about this week, but first let's just back up to the top and go over what is happening right now. In the world of live streaming, there are a lot of different things that can happen, but really there are two major categories of live stream, right? There's a live stream that replicates something that's already happening so that you can look at it like you're looking through the window out at the street at what's happening outside. And this is what a lot of churches are doing with their live streams. A Sunday service happens just like normal, and then the live stream puts that experience in front of someone at home on their computer so that they can watch it sort of as if they were there. And then there are live streams that are designed like this one to be engaging to a specific person. So I start by saying, hi, welcome to the live stream. Welcome back to the channel. And things like that where I acknowledge you, the viewer. And so it's a little bit like we're breaking the fourth wall where we acknowledge the other end of the stream. And both of these have pros and cons, which I've talked about in past videos, but whether you're doing an in-person like this engaging stream or whether you're doing a more distanced stream like churches are often doing, you are probably feeling a couple of tensions right now. So this week I am focusing on those people who feel really overwhelmed because this is not something that you were really planning to explore. It more happened to you with the self-quarantine. These are streams that are aimed at people who are nervous about how expensive live streaming looks to get into: camera equipment, microphones, lights, tripods, all that junk. We're going to talk about the numbers. We're going to give you some actual recommendations on products to buy at different budget levels. And it's also aimed at people who are not particularly techie. I will use the words that are sort of industry jargon, but I will also break those down so that if this is not your world, you can still participate in it, because so many people right now are live streaming out of necessity, especially with nonprofits and churches, that you shouldn't have to be someone who loves live streaming and is super thrilled about the idea of doing one in order to get into the field. So with those in mind, let's break down an overview of the live stream ecosystem. Every live stream is made up of 5 key components. We've got inputs, which are like your camera, the microphone here, anything that takes what's happening in the room and gets it into technology so that we can send it to people. Those are your inputs. All of your inputs go to a switcher. Your switcher is the piece of the equation that decides which things we see and hear at any given time. When your switcher puts all those pieces together, we get a program feed that we send to our encoder. That's step 3. The encoder takes a video stream and turns it into ones and zeros and beams it up to the internet. It's received by a distribution platform, number 4. That's something like Facebook, YouTube, a platform that takes your video and sends it to people. So we've sent it all these ones and zeros, it takes that and puts it in front of lots and lots of people. And then lastly, we have endpoints, which is what the viewer is watching this on. So you could be watching on a TV right now, you could be watching on your phone, you could be watching on your laptop, any of those places. And regardless of where you're watching, that device is an endpoint. And while we don't have any control over the endpoint you choose, we do need to change what we do based on the decisions you make, because our viewers need to be able to see in a format that works for them. And we'll get to that. Each day this week, I will be live at 4 p.m. talking about one of these 5 pieces. So today, we're focusing on the first one, inputs. And that means we're talking cameras, microphones, lights, all that kind of stuff. Tomorrow, we'll be back to talk about switchers and so on and so forth. So, with inputs, there are a lot of things to think about here, because a lot needs to happen to get a good reproduction of what's in the room to the people who are not in the room. You have to think about a lot of things. So first, obviously, the camera. A camera is something that collects a picture and then sends that picture out. And for our cameras, we're actually not worried about recording size or resolution or any of those things, because a live stream, we're never really going to go above 1080p. Let me break down resolutions for you. Resolutions are an endpoint piece. Resolution says what size is the picture that I'm sending to people, right? So you'll hear 1080p or 720p or whatever. That's talking about how many pixels horizontally and vertically are in an image. So a pixel is like one of the dots in your computer screen. So if you add all those together, you get some basically rectangle that's, for example, 1920 across the bottom and 1080 up the top, or up the side. That's 1080p. So the different resolutions like that are the different sizes that you send people. And the higher your resolution, the more details you can see. 1080p is really the highest quality that you're ever going to be streaming to people, because the bigger the picture you're sending, the more information you have to send. And so that's really taxing on your internet. It's really taxing on the user's internet. Anybody watching on mobile is probably only going to watch in 720 anyway, just because they need the smaller pictures to get to their phones. So when you're looking at cameras to get, don't let the resolution be the buzzword that hooks you on something. Now, we talked about a bunch of different budget levels today. That's what we're going to cover. But before we get there, let's talk about the key components that we need to see in a camera. The first thing we need to see is what's called clean HDMI out. Now, most cameras that, well, every camera you can use for a live stream, but most cameras that are on the market have different input and output ports on the side of them. So if I pop this open, you can see there's a bunch of different openings here. One of these is an HDMI port. So I can plug in an HDMI cable and then send that to my switcher in order to process the picture. If the camera doesn't have that, if it only records to an SD card or something like that, then you're not going to have any success using it for live stream, because it can't send a live picture. It has to record first. So you need to make sure that it has an HDMI out. Now, when I say it needs to be a clean HDMI out, what I mean is it can't send, or it has to send the picture by itself. So for example, I have DSLRs that I thought were sitting near, here's one. So I have some entry-level DSLRs like this Nikon D3400, and this has an HDMI port on the side right here. The problem is that that HDMI port is actually meant for photographers to use a bigger screen to check that things are in focus. So it overlays a bunch of information, like how bright is the shot and what is the shutter speed I'm using and all the other technical stuff that you need to operate a camera. We don't need for our viewers to see the operating stuff. We need them to just see the picture, which is what we call a clean feed. So you need to make sure that your camera is capable of doing that. Now, this is something you can answer really easily. You just, whatever camera it is, you copy and paste the camera name into Google, and then you say clean HDMI with a question mark, and that's all it takes. So that is one of our key qualities. It needs to have a clean HDMI out. Now, some cameras have built-in live streaming, like GoPros. They will live stream right out of the camera through your phone using an app, and that's something that we'll get to as well. So in that case, you don't necessarily need a clean HDMI out because you're going straight to the internet. But that's rare, and I would expect for most of us, we're going to end up using cameras that have that HDMI output. Now, another thing that we want to consider is whether this camera will work with a wall outlet. Again, back to my, I don't know why I even bothered putting this back there. Back to this camera. This camera only takes batteries. I can't plug it into the wall and then use it while it's plugged in. Now, that might be fine for shorter live streams, but for really long live streams, or if you're doing a whole, let's say you have 4 church services in a day, if you want to live stream all day, then you don't want to keep switching out batteries or forgetting worse, and then it, cuts to a black screen in the middle of your live stream. You want to be able to just plug that into the wall and forget about it, and it'll just keep running. So that's an ideal situation. It's not for everyone, especially like if you're a nonprofit doing a product release or a fundraising update or something like that. You can do those really quickly, so a battery operated camera might be fine for you. But if you're a church or someone with a longer service, if you're doing maybe a concert event or something for your nonprofit or a gala, and you want to live stream that event, you're going to want to make sure that you can plug that into a wall. Now, when you get to the really expensive cameras, there are some other options, because there are some batteries that just go for days and days and days. I'm actually using one in this camera right now. But we're looking at the budget options. So to avoid running into battery issues, we're looking for cameras that plug into the wall. Great. He's going to sit in the corner now. He's done. So those are the three main things we want to look for. We're looking for a clean HDMI output or built-in live stream. We're looking for a battery option that lasts a long time, or the ability to plug it into the wall. And then lastly, so I guess I didn't talk about all 3 options. The last thing we want to look at is the lens or visual angle that it's able to capture. So like a GoPro doesn't have an interchangeable lens like this Nikon here does, but the GoPro has a really wide angle lens, which I know is great if I need to be in close proximity to the camera and still see everything, or if I want to turn it around and not have to worry about focus. If you find something with a really tight lens, that might be better for a church where you want to zoom in from the back of the room and see the pastor. So though the lens angle is another consideration. With all that in mind, let's look at first the sub $100 tier. So we're talking about webcams here. Webcams are cheap and they're fast to set up. And they're pretty much all the same, but I went ahead and picked out a couple options to show you anyway. So let me jump over to my computer here 1 second. And I'll show you. This first one is called the Microsoft LifeCam. And my mic bumped right into me there. This one's called the Microsoft LifeCam, and it's actually a fairly old camera. I think it's been out since 2014. It's less than $100, 75 bucks, and it will stream in 1080p, which again is the biggest picture that you'll ever need to send. A nice advantage of this one is that because it's older and only needs USB 2.0, which basically USB has gotten faster and faster over time. 2.0 is the last one before now. Because it's older, it doesn't take nearly as many resources from your computer. So if your computer is looking at, say, 5 of these, which I've actually done once, it can handle switching through all those pictures, which is really helpful when you get to the switching stage. So this is the first one that I would suggest, $75. There's nothing particularly fancy about it. You can technically zoom it in and out, but I wouldn't. The tighter in it gets, the less light it sees. And the other one here is by a company called Razer. And this one is called the Kayo webcam. And this one's $100, so still within our budget, barely. And a nice advantage of this one is it has a light built into the camera itself. And although you can't see it in the product picture super well, right here is the screw mount that you would use to attach it to a tripod. So this is a pretty versatile little webcam in that it's got a pretty long cable, you can put it anywhere, and you have some mounting options for it. So if you've got like a selfie stick for your phone that has little feet, or if you've got a tripod, or if you can borrow a tripod, or you can go buy one. But in any of those cases, this one has a light built into it, which is really nice for getting a good quality video feed out of it. So that one is the Razer Kayo webcam. And both of those situations, or any other webcam, the major thing you're going to need to do is cater to the camera with your lighting. The smaller a camera sensor is, like the thing inside it that looks at stuff, the smaller that thing is, the more light you're going to need because it just can't get that much light into it. Our eyes, because we're humans and we have evolved for years and years and years and centuries to be good at seeing things, handle low light a whole lot better than cameras do. Cameras are very poor imitations, and in that respect, you need tons and tons of light to make a webcam look good. For example, the webcam in my laptop, I actually use about $700 of film lighting in order to get any kind of good picture out of it. Oh, I didn't switch my scene back. My bad. Amateur hour over here. We'll talk about that when we get to switching tomorrow. So it takes tons and tons of lighting to get any kind of good picture out of the webcam in my laptop, versus the camera you're using has a lens on it that takes tons of light in, and it has a huge sensor inside. So I don't need that much lighting to make it look good. And there are some ways to get around that, and we'll get to lights at the end of this, but I just want that to be something you're considering. If you're looking at webcams as the cheaper option, bear in mind that you're still going to have to pick up some lighting to go with those. So webcams are the sub $100 option. Now, if you've got a little bit more to spend, I put the next tier at up to about $750. Then you can start looking into cameras like this one, camcorders basically, where they've got the whole thing is built in. It's all one package. You can zoom from the camera. There's no interchangeable lenses or anything like that. And these are honestly really, really versatile for nonprofits because you get some multi-purpose use out of them. And as we all know, as a nonprofit or church, when you have to convince some people that you're going to spend money on them that was donated towards a cause, it needs to be as multi-use as possible, which is where things like this shine. So these will not give you super cinematic images. You know, if you're watching YouTube and you're like, oh, I want to look like those vloggers do, this might not be the camera for you. But if you're doing live streams like this, talking head feeds where you're updating people on what's going on, these are really versatile and they handle a lot of environments well. They look just as good from the back of a church as they do in the backseat of a car. So you can get a lot out of them. Plus, the camcorder can record to an internal memory card, and then you get the ability to make other videos out of it or send videos like, you know, to other companies for editing, like Epic Video. Hint, hint. Anyway, this is not a business pitch. But in that regard, they're really versatile, and there are some great low-cost options here. So let me pull you back over to the computer screen, and let's take a look at the Canon Vixia here. This whole series of there's a whole line of camcorders called the Canon Vixia whatever, and all of them will work for this job, but this one is only $220, so that's pretty great. And this is on BH Photo, which is a really reliable seller, so it's not like an eBay person who marked their price way down. I went and found real reliable prices here. The nice thing about a camera like this is it's got, you can see it zooms in 57 times. That's huge. That gets you a lot of distance. It does have a battery on the back, which is kind of lame, but camcorders can almost all be plugged into wall chargers. And I'm not sure if we get a picture of the back of this one for me to show you whether that's possible or not, but we'll have a quick look here. Yes, nope, that one's, so I was looking at the USB here in the middle, but the USB port is not on this camera. It's not a charger. Let's see if we get a picture without the battery here. Nope, doesn't look like we do. That's okay. I'm going to trust that because it's true for 97% of camcorders, it's true for this one. And that would be an easy support question for, BH Photo Video to find out the answer to. So camcorders like that are a great option. Or if you have a little bit more to spend or you're looking for something versatile, then we're looking at GoPros. GoPro is the doer's camera. If you are a nonprofit who has a lot of community activities where you're bringing volunteers down, or if you're a church that maybe goes places, you have a lot of service opportunities in your community, I cannot recommend having a GoPro enough. The nice thing about a GoPro is that it records as well as going live, which most cameras will until we get to the really expensive ones, go figure. But a GoPro sees everything. If you throw it in the general direction of an activity, the GoPro will capture that thing and it will look pretty good. They don't handle low light super well, so you want to make sure that you light yourself reasonably. But besides that, there really are no drawbacks. GoPro can go live right out of the camera through the app, or you can plug in a micro HDMI to the side and go live through a switcher. I've got a GoPro here. This is the GoPro Hero 5, so it's like 3 generations old now, and it still looks great. And right here in the side, there is an HDMI port that I can use to plug it into a switcher. You can also plug in external microphones, all that kind of thing. Which is another big win. So GoPro is a massive contender. They have some other options for action cameras like YI or Yi or whatever. Ye old camera. They have an alternative action camera. It's not very good. Nikon's got an action camera, the Key Mission. It's adequate. It's not great. The Insta360 ONE-R, which is a new 360-degree / GoPro style action camera from Insta360. It's also pretty good, but I would not recommend it over the GoPro for live streaming because the colors in the GoPro are much better than the colors in the Insta360. So if you were going to shoot video and then in editing you could make the colors look good, then that might be a better option for you because it can do the GoPro stuff or the 360-degree stuff. This is not that circumstance. So we're back to the GoPro Hero 8. This is a $400 camera. It will be battery or charger fed. You can feed it with a USB-C charger, which is also convenient because most devices are going towards USB-C, so you probably have a couple extras from your phone or your hard drives, things like that. The kit comes with, you can see here, you can add lights to the side. This is the vlogging setup for it, but you can use a lot of this to go live any other way as well. And GoPro has tons of accessories. So you can mount a GoPro to anything, bike handlebars, you can clamp it to a light pole. Any organization that goes places and does things like city cleanups or soup kitchens or anything like that, those organizations will benefit from having a GoPro. It's multi-purpose use, so it should be an easy expense to convince your board or whoever your leadership are, and it will give you a lot of flexibility. But what if you've got a little bit more to spend and you want like the epitome of quality? Well, now we start looking at the hybrid cameras space. So that's like DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, cameras like this one. This is a Nikon Z6. And I'll show you the product page in a second so we can talk price. The thing about cameras like this is they have interchangeable lenses. So I can pop this lens off the side and put a new one on the front. And the benefit to that is that you can drastically change the look of your camera without having to get a whole new camera. They handle low light really, really well. In fact, the every video I've made since I don't even know when has been made on this camera. So there's a lot of, my story videos when I do interviews or testimonials with people, anything like that, you get really high quality out of them. And that's just when you record onto a card directly. However, they will also provide a clean HDMI out feed, which remember is important. And we can send that back to a switcher or to a capture card for a computer, anything like that, to get really great live streams out of them. One of the major benefits to a camera like this is the autofocus. If you've got native lenses, and they're all, by the way, about as good as each other, Canon, Sony, Nikon, whatever, at this point, they all pretty much make the perfect camera with a different color pattern on the outside. But with autofocus like that, you don't need a camera operator, so you can just set the camera down somewhere and trust that I'm probably still in focus, and that was not always the case. They have a bunch of really sturdy mounting options, so they're not as versatile as the GoPro, but with one of these tripod plates, you can mount them to most accessories that are on the market. They can be fed by a battery, or most of them from either a wall charger or what's called a dummy battery. So a dummy battery would mean I take the battery out of here, and I would have a thing that's shaped like this battery, except I plug something in on the back of it, and that goes to the wall. So you put the battery in, and then it just stays with the battery flap open, and there would be a cable coming out that goes back to the wall, which is a way to get around whether it's wall fed or not. So these are really great cameras for that. I love my Nikon Z6. It's one of the best investments that I've made as a videographer. They're really powerful in terms of user experience. Now, if you're working with volunteers and you want the most volunteer-friendly camera layout, I think Canon has the best menus in their cameras. I think Nikon gets the best results as far as picture without any tweaking, like you don't need to color grade it or anything, which for a live stream is pretty important. And I think Sony has probably the most reliable camera in terms of, making a battery stretch its very longest and those kinds of things. So there's pros and cons to each one, but they're very subtle differences. You're going to be happy no matter which one you get. Let me show you some product specs for the Nikon, and then we'll look at some of the others too. So we're over here. I gotta move my mic. My mic literally swings towards me, and I have to catch it here. That's something I will have to look into. Some technician somewhere is getting fired for that. Okay, so we're looking at the Nikon Z6. The Z6 by itself is $1,800. I would still rank this as probably the sub $3,000 tier, just because we're looking at lenses, you got to get the dummy battery, those kind of pieces. So we're looking at some serious money here. But the picture you get out of the Z6 is really good. And just to show you the competitor, here's Canon's version, the EOS R, and it's $1,700 or $1,800. And again, you'll need to get a lens to go with it. You'll need to get the dummy battery to plug it into the wall, those kind of things. Now you can get them as a kit. So here's one with a 24-105. The numbers around the lens are breaking down how far the lens will zoom in. So the bigger number is going to be how tight the shot gets, and the smaller number is going to be how wide the shot gets. To give you a general sense of those, this is a 35mm lens. So you're looking at that amount of zoom. I'm about 3 feet from the camera, maybe 4 feet from the camera. I might be more than that. I might be 6 feet from the camera. But yeah, so this is the 35mm. 35 is generally a good sense for looking like what your eyes will see out of a camera. So those are these ones. There is a cheaper contender here. This is the Sony a6400, and it's only $1,000 with a lens. Now this is not a particularly tight lens. A 50mm lens is not... You're probably only going to see from, here to here on a 50mm lens. But if we jump back to our pricing, that's pretty appealing, that $1,000 there. Plus free shipping, although you'll have to wait a month for it right now if you buy it on Amazon. They also sell it in kits, so this one comes with a little tripod and stuff like that, although, as with most things, Amazon's not sure when they'll get it back in stock. Now this 18-135 lens is going to be a better result. So if you go with this camera, then my recommendation is to buy the a6400 with the 18-135. 135 is a really tight shot, so you can get lots of detail, and 18 is really, really wide, so you can get a lot of things in the frame. So that's going to be a versatile option, and that's $1,300 total. Now, there are some reasons that it's cheaper like that, but I don't know that they're worth diving into on this stream. Basically, the sensor inside is a little bit smaller than the sensor in some of the other cameras, and that has some effects. But it's not like a deal breaker, and I don't think it will affect your live streams. It would have a lot more to do with cinematic, like product videos and things like that. And that brings us to the studio camera side of this more expensive tier. So companies like Blackmagic Design have a studio only camera. So this won't record anything. It's not multi-purpose, but it will give you the best live stream results really of any camera you can buy that is under $3,000. These studio cameras have a massive screen on the back of them. I've installed them at 3 or 4 churches now, and they're really easy to see, so you can tell what's in focus. They've got this sun hood, so if you're outside doing an event, it will block out glare and you can see what's going on. They have a built-in talkback to the camera, so right here on the side you can see the little headphone icon and the microphone icon that you can literally plug in an aircraft headset and you already have a communication with your operator. They do require you to use SDI or fiber, but they won't let you use HDMI. So at this point, you're in a different tier of equipment. You're at a more expensive professional level. All of the cameras up to this point have been sort of prosumer cameras. At this point, we're talking professionals. And if you want help navigating, which ones do I get? How do I get the right lenses for that? Tripods, all that kind of, these are pretty heavy, so you want to make sure that you get a heavy duty tripod, that kind of stuff. Feel free to send me a message or drop me a comment and I will help you navigate that minefield of snake oil and awesome products, because there's equal part to both. This, when it's fully kitted out, looks pretty intimidating, but they're actually very easy to use. And as far as training volunteers, Blackmagic makes the easiest to use cameras of any camera manufacturer in the game. So if you need to train a large team of diverse people to use cameras with varying technical experience, I would suggest those Blackmagics. Let's see if my mic will stay put this time. That's good. This will be like a little inside joke just between you and I, right? We'll just sit here and pretend that the microphone is doing exactly what it should be doing. Okay, so we've covered a lot of cameras. What are my recommendations? Well, honestly, my recommendation is that if you're looking to stay on a budget, you pick up a camera like this one. One of these camcorders is very easy to operate. They're intuitive. It's all in one package. You can plug it into the wall, and then you can plug an output into your computer, and you can move on with your life. So in that respect, these are a great buy. And like I said, the Canon Vixia series are almost all fine. Just make sure before you actually purchase that you check for that clean HDMI out on the camera. You can also get some guidance from that at any Best Buy or camera store. Just say, hey, I want to use this for live stream, and they will guide you to the right ones. In general, they don't rip you off, at least in my experience. But if you're worried about it, feel free to, again, send us a comment at Next Level Nonprofit, and we will take a look at the product with you. If you're looking to spend more money, I really think a hybrid camera or a mirrorless like the Nikon Z6, the Canon EOS R, the Sony a6400 is a good way to go because you get so much use out of it. You can use this for everything from, cleanup events to live stream talking head updates to live stream concerts to whatever. They just do so much and they do it all really well. So that would be my recommendation from there. If you are installing a system where you plan to go live regularly, even after quarantine, then I would suggest looking at the Blackmagic studio cameras, like we just talked about, and putting in a full, at that point, you're looking at a switcher and some other pieces, but I would do that route and that ecosystem. And for those, like the a6400, they have what's called a crop sensor. So let me just take a second and explain what that means. Crop sensors are smaller than full-frame sensors. Those are two categories of camera sensor, and it's why the Sony a6400 was cheaper than, like, this Nikon Z6 is a full-frame, so it has the biggest size sensor that is relevant to what it's doing. With a crop sensor, because the sensor is smaller, but the lens in the front is the same, it zooms in for every lens. So if I have this 35mm lens like you see on my camera right now, but I put it on a crop sensor, because the sensor doesn't see the whole width of the lens, it only sees part of it, it's as if we zoomed the lens in a little bit, so you get a tighter picture. The issue with that can be if you want like a nice wide shot of something, it can be hard to find a lens that gets wide enough for the crop sensor to get everything in the frame. If you're a church and you've got people on stage communicating far away, then it's not nearly as big of a deal because you're trying to zoom in closer to them anyway. In fact, it might even be an asset. So that's all that crop sensors mean. The industry will tell you that you get better depth of field, like the fuzzy backgrounds. You'll get that better with a full frame sensor than you will on a crop sensor, but I don't think it's true, or if it is, the difference is really minor. And the other thing you might hear is that low light is better on a full frame than it is on a crop sensor. That's also true. And the reason is that the bigger sensor has more sensor for light to hit, so things look brighter. So that's the difference between crop sensors and full frame. It's not a huge deal, it's just something to kind of be aware of. Let me check my notes here and see what we're doing next. Ooh, we're talking audio. This is my baby. My background is audio engineering. So you need to capture good audio for a live stream. Why? Well, because picture without sound is broken. If you have good sound and bad picture, that's radio. But if you have picture and you don't have good sound, that's broken. Hopefully my sound doesn't sound like trash right now, or that'll be really awkward when we go to edit it and it's like, oh, this sounds like junk and he just said audio is the most important thing. But hopefully I didn't do that. There are a number of ways to get audio into your live stream. The first and most easy is to use onboard audio. So like your camera has a microphone in it. And if you use that audio, then you'll get sound. It just won't be super great. It's hard to get your camera close enough to the subject to get audio at a quality that's worth listening to, if that makes sense. Right now, I'm right up against this microphone, and you can hear my voice really well. It's isolated from the background noise. You can tell what I'm trying to say. Now, if I get up and I stand back, if I go back here and I try and talk to the camera, then you hear all the echoing off the walls and you hear the kind of crappy room noise and you have to turn up your volume to hear me, and it's just not a great situation. So, although this microphone's like a really nice mic, so that might not be the best circumstance to teach with. So with that in mind, onboard audio is not the best unless you're doing something very run and gun. Like if you take your GoPro out to a city cleanup and you want to do a live update for your donors or your tribe, then you just pop that on and you can talk to it, and probably from this distance the audio will be just fine. You might have some wind noise, but otherwise you're fine. Anything further away than this distance, and we're going to move to something new. In those circumstances, we're looking at microphones, like an external microphone that we connect to our camera source somehow. That would be something like this. I thought I had a lav mic around here somewhere. I'll get to that in a second anyway. It would be something like this, or it would be a lav mic that clips to you. And my last 2 live streams have both used a lav mic clipped to me, so if you want to hear what those sound like, you can always go watch those. A microphone like this, the Rode Video mic, is really nice for medium distance shots because it mounts to the top of your camera with this little cold shoe mount. So you just slide it onto your camera and it sits there in place. And then this plugs into the side of the camera. So you're still only having to connect your camera back to the switcher. The audio doesn't need a separate path to travel down. And it means that your audio and your video will be in sync still. The problem with these is just like the onboard microphone of the camera, at some point you're too far away for this to hear you well. And at that point, you want to move on to a boom mic. Now, a boom mic is a mic on a boom. So technically, this can be a boom mic if I were to attach it to a stand like this one, because I would be propelling the microphone away from the camera and towards the person. But because the cable is only like 1.5 inches long, it would be really difficult for me to connect it back to the camera. So they make microphones like this one that are designed to pick up vocals from far away, that they call them shotgun microphones because I guess they're sort of gun-shaped and we're Americans. But you can take this and clip it into any standard microphone clip, attach that to a boom like this one, and then point it at your talent from above, or you can hold it next to them. You can even put it on a boom that someone is hand holding. So like I've taken just this part off of the mic stand before and extended it to its full length and then like poked this out way over in the distance and been like, hey, just don't let me know if this falls into the camera shot. And that can be a fun, exciting moment, but you need a second operator at that point. If you're using a built-in studio look like this one, then you could always, if you don't want to see the microphone, you could put one of these on a stand and then put it up above so that it's out of the frame, but still it's only, if I move back so you can see, we're still only maybe 2 feet away from the person speaking. So that's pretty nice. These can be mounted to the top of your camera. There just isn't really a good reason to do it. If you're going to mount something to your camera, use something that has an on-camera mount like this. The distance you gain is just not that much greater. There are a lot of nuances to microphone placement and things like that if we got into now, we would be here for 1.5 years of me talking. But in the future, I will come back to audio for camera because it's something that is so easy to get right if you just master a couple of basic principles, and often people do not. Now, it is worth considering that you might use your smartphone to live stream because your smartphone has a camera in it. It's a pretty good camera. You've got one on the front and one on the back, so you can even switch between them to get 2 different shots. And you don't need to buy anything new for it. If you're going to use your smartphone to live stream, then almost 100% you're going to need to get some kind of external microphone. And a microphone like this one is a great option. This is the Saramonic Smart Mic, and it's teeny tiny, so I might Google the product page here in just a second so you can see more details about it. But it plugs into your phone, and then it stays here, so then you're holding your phone to look at yourself and the microphone sees you or picks up your audio from there. And again, just like with that boom mic, we've just created a distance of about 1.5 feet or 2 feet from my mouth, which is way better for this than a phone microphone, which is going to pick up all the ambient noise and sound mostly like junk. So that's a smartphone based microphone. And then a lav mic, which I'm really bothered that I own one and am not able to show it to you, but that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes, right? A lav mic would be something that could plug into your phone and then clip onto your shirt. A lav mic is better if it's just going to be you talking because you're going to get better audio out of it. But if you're doing an interview or something, plugging this into your phone means you can swing it between yourself and the other person. And that's really helpful for getting decent audio, but of both of you. So that's the smartphone interfaces. Now, if you're live streaming through your computer, you don't necessarily need a microphone like this one or like this one. You could also get a microphone with USB on the end of it. If your computer is your switcher, then something like the Blue Yeti would work great for you. And let's take a look at those. So we're looking at audio now. Let me just swap over to that list of products and see if I've got the Blue Yeti somewhere up here. Oh, I thought I did. Well, this is a lapel microphone. So here's a lav. This is the Tascam DR10L, and this little plug bit in the top of it, that's the part that you would just take out of the recorder and put into your phone or something like that. Let me show you the Blue Yeti. Bam. Bam. Right there. Here's a Blue Yeti. It's about $215. I'm sorry, it's $99. The one below it was $215. It plugs in with a USB. It's got a headphone output on it so that you can monitor your audio and make sure you don't sound like garbage. And it's got a little desktop mount, so it's pretty convenient. So that's great for like a talking head studio shot kind of thing. If you're going to use an external microphone like the one I'm using, which is this guy in a little shock mount so you don't hear it vibrate when it moves. If you're using an external mic like this, it will have a plug on the bottom called XLR, and that's just the professional microphone cable. In that case, you'll need some kind of interface to plug that XLR cable into that will then spit out a USB on the back, and that'll be how it gets into your computer. So something like that. This is a $48 USB audio interface by Behringer. Behringer are sort of the Walmart of the audio world, and in general, they don't make super great products. But if you're not planning to live stream forever, $50 to get you up and running is pretty great. Especially if you're a church and you've already got microphones sitting around backstage, there's no reason to buy another one. The Focusrite Scarlett Solo is a higher quality option that is double the price. We're looking at $110 here. But it will give you cleaner audio. So like you hear all that like lights and the popping and the background noise and the fans and all that kind of stuff. This will give you better results at eliminating all that electrical noise. From there, the next level would be multi-microphone setups, in which case you need a mixer like this one. So if I were doing an interview with like 4 people or something, then I would use a mixer like this to plug all those microphones into and mix them all independently, rather than trying to pick them all up with one microphone. 2 people you can get away with, but any more than that, and you're going to take some serious sacrifices in audio quality just to pick all that up. This one is $600, but there is a little brother, the $400 XR12, that is what I would probably recommend for a generic live stream. The major difference between the first one and this one is that this one has 12 inputs and the other one has 18, and this one only has 4 microphone inputs while the other one has 18. You can still plug like instruments and stuff into these, but if you're live streaming, the odds are good that you won't want that, so I wouldn't worry about it. Both of them will connect by USB to your computer, and because you're live streaming, you don't need multi-channel out of the board, so the USB interface will work the same. If that just sounded like a bunch of confusing jargon to you, don't worry about it. Just know that they both do the same things for the purpose of live stream when you plug a USB into your computer. And that would be the audio interfaces side of things. Another major piece of this that we want to talk about is lighting. Take a look at the scene that I'm sitting in right now. The reason it looks good is because I'm using multiple lights in it. So if I were to start turning those off, the scene would start to look pretty poor, and you would begin to see the camera's shortcomings in a low light scenario. So if I were to take, well, actually, I won't do the example just yet. Let's talk about lighting strategy. There's a thing called 3-point lighting, and that is what, in general, people use to get high quality lighting. So let me grab this remote here. This is for my key light up there. So if I take my light over here in the yonder and I turn it off, now you're seeing just the lights behind me. In 3-point lighting, we have a key light, which is the light that is our main, we see things light. We have a fill light, which fills in the shadows on the other side of the person's face. And then we have a rim light, which creates the silhouette around me that you're seeing over here. See how I'm kind of highlighted by some light behind me? You can especially see it on this shoulder where it's starting to kind of rim my shoulder. So if I turn off these lights, now you're only seeing that light behind me there is a set light. So it's mostly putting glow on the room behind me. Now I'll turn on my rim light, and you see again on my hair and around the top of my shoulders, you're seeing the sort of rim that it creates. Then I turn on my key light, and you can see me. So those are the principles behind lighting. And then for a more or less dramatic shot, you just move your key light more and more around the person. The further to my side that I would move that light, the darker the shadows on this side of my face would get. And if I get dark shadows over here, we sort of get that dramatic, moody look, which isn't really great for a talking head informational video like this one. But if you were telling a story or interviewing someone, then you might want to light them that way. A live interview could be really cool and powerful. I haven't thought about doing those before, but I guess other people have because they do it on news shows and talk shows all the time. But anyway, so those are sort of the principles of lighting. All you really need is a key light, especially for a live stream. People are not expecting this to look like Hollywood. They're just expecting it to look watchable, right? It's 2020. We don't want people to be looking at, potato feeds. So we're trying to avoid all that pixely noise nonsense. If I turn this off, you might start to see a little bit of noise in the dark parts of the shot. So sort of where my hand is here, it might start to get grainy. It'll get worse if I turn this off. You'll start to see like the dark parts of the picture up here are going to get really noisy and sort of bubbly and grainy and have all those digital artifacts and that kind of stuff we're trying to avoid. So that's the real win here, is avoiding those. Now, something that is great is that if I were to, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited to tell you about lighting. Let's talk about our options first. Sunlight is an option. It's a great option. The sun is huge and bright and free and everywhere. All you have to do is be near a window to take advantage of it. If the shadows that it casts are like harsh or distracting, you know, like if you see window panes across your face or something, putting a thin white curtain or a shower curtain or a t-shirt between the window and you will sort of diffuse the light and make it softer so that it's not casting those harsh shadows. When you get above there and you're like, oh, I want to be inside ever, then we start looking at other options. So let's jump back to my product list here, and I would have loved, by the way, to just show you all these in person and demo them, but I can't go anywhere because we're in quarantine, and respect the quarantine so that we can get out of this mess quickly. But because of that, I couldn't just go pick up all these products and show them to you. I'm having to show you the like Amazon pages and stuff. So at Lowe's, they sell this work light for $32, and I've used it on film sets and it looks great. And you can get all sorts of lights like this, and they're usually LED, so they last a long time. The batteries go for ages and ages because they're meant for people who are building things in their garages and stuff like that. So this is a really good option, and as long as you make them match, they will all be, well, of course they will all match. Let me back up. Lights have a thing called color temperature, which is how blue or white or orange that light is. It's sort of a tint to the shade of light that it puts out because no white is like a perfect white. So if you have lights that are not matching, then they will have different color temperatures, as in different tints, which can get really distracting if you don't lean into it and make it intentional. But if you get all the same light, then they will all have the same color temperature, and then you don't have to worry about it. It's much easier to set up your camera and get natural looking skin tones and pictures out of it. So this is the $40 option. We're going to jump right up to the $130 option, which is something like this on Amazon. Neewer, as a company, makes very cheap but pretty high quality equipment. I've used panels like this one before, and they're pretty good. They're not super duper bright, but they're better than the work light would have been, and because they're a little bigger than the work light, they will cover more area, so that's nice. The other thing that once you get into lights like this, they're going to be built to be shot on a camera, so you can, for example, change the color temperature. That's what these two numbers mean. Anything ending in a K is a measurement in Kelvin of your color temperature. It just tells you how blue or orange your light is. That's how they measure that. So if you've got a wide range like this, it means you can change it to match other lights. You can just play with it until it matches the white light they put out, and then all of your lights will match. This also comes with stands, which is nice. And little carrying cases if you're feeling, really fancy. So that's the $140 option. The next option, which is the one I'm using right now as my key light, is the Godox SL200. This is a knockoff of better video lights that, frankly, I've been really pleased with the results from. It's super duper bright, it's dimmable, it comes with a remote, so I can, turn it down or up. That's actually really blinding, so I'm going to put it back to where it was. Let's try and not overwhelm this world with light. Great. It's got a little reflector that goes on the front here, but it also has this is a standard lighting mount on the front. So you can actually use that to mount other accessories to it. You can buy soft boxes and other things from the big people and mount them to this knockoff light and get pretty good results. And that's only $360. If you're only going to invest in one thing, invest in sound. If you're going to invest in two things, invest in sound and lighting. The last thing you should worry about is upgrading your camera. Once you have one, you can do a lot to make that picture look way better versus any camera will struggle with no light. That kind of a situation. Okay, so we've talked about that light. Now when you want to play with the big dogs, you're spending about $745 to $1,000 on a light, and this is the Aputure 120D. Aputure is a very, very, very good quality light. It will be bright enough for any circumstance. You can even bring them outside and use them as the sun, like in your yard or whatever. They're great for that. They're Bluetooth controllable. They come with a swaggy camera case. There's just a lot of good things to say about Aputure lighting. So I would not recommend going the whole way to Aputure at the start, but I would make them the end goal, right? If live streaming is something you invest in and then it takes off and becomes really important to your organization, this is how you invest in growing that, is you get some better lights and some better audio. This is the Saramonic Smart Mic we talked about a few seconds ago. It's $25. I just wanted to make sure I told you the price because I realized I forgot. So that's our lighting we've talked about. Now, the last thing I want to cover today as far as inputs is set design. And when it comes to set design, there's not really a right or a wrong way to do it. I have created here a fairly generic, bland, empty set, and yet I'm still pretty happy with it. Now, we could upgrade it, and we'll talk about some ways to make it better. But in general, you want your set to draw focus to your subject. So one thing that I did is I made my background primarily white, and then I wore color. And that really helps me pop off of the background. Another thing that I did is I used what are called leading lines. Now the leading lines are in the set. You can see like this shelf on my side here. It's basically drawing your eye in towards me. And same thing with this wall, drawing your eye in towards me. So if you sit yourself in a corner, then the walls will create those leading lines that bring people back to your face. Another thing you want to avoid is putting any major distractions off to the side. So like this big obnoxious thing is right next to my face. It's a gimbal. But in the frame, it's right next to my face. It's technically way behind me. But by putting it there, it means that you're not like drawn off like, what's that big obnoxious thing in the corner? Versus if I were to have like, hang on. If I took a tripod and I just had a tripod here because that's video related and now it's part of my set, now you're like, why is that thing off on the left? You can't stop looking at it. I can see you trying to stop looking at it, but it's just got this gravity. Your eyes are just like, shoo, you can't stop. And I get it. And that's why when we build sets, we don't put things off to the side unless there's a leading line to bring them back to our viewer, or to our talent, I should say. And then we throw our tripods on the ground. So that's something that I've done. Another thing is don't put anything in the foreground if you're not going to use it. It's really tempting to try and get depth or to have like a busy set that's full of things. I always recommend against it, especially as a nonprofit or other cause-based organization, like a fair trade business or whatever. You don't want people to be distracted from what you're saying. You want them here, right? My eyes are up here, not down here, up here. So you'd want to keep that front area not obnoxiously full of stuff. The other benefit of not having tons of things in front of you is there's not a lot to distract you, the talent, from making eye contact with the camera, because that's your viewer and you want to be making eye contact with them. I have some props here in front of me, but I've used them all day, so that's a little different. I needed them as teaching examples. Let's see here. What else do I have on my note? Colors to make the subject pop, drawing focus to the subject. You do want it to still be visually interesting, and making sure your colors sort of match with each other. So there is a handful of small colored things in the background. Like this camera is red, and that case for a light is red, and that's red. So like making your colors match. So this is mostly black and white with a couple splashes of warm color, right? There's some reds over there. You see some pinks and some purples over here. That's the case for the light that's over there. So that's all working together to be not distracting. We don't want anything to stand out. And if you look at the set and something does stand out to you, like this thing, then use it as a tool to bring viewers back to the center, like I did. By centering that product, I've centered your eye on the bright white thing, and that brings you back towards where my face is. We can make it a little bit more visually interesting by adding some lights in the background. So if you start spending on lights, then you could do something like that and pop a little light into the background. 3 or 4 little pops like that would be kind of neat. In this circumstance, I actually think it's a little distracting because I'm wearing the same color. So then it takes my eyes and it draws them up away from me and towards that hot spot on the wall. So I'm going to go turn it back off. It could also be neat to paint one of these walls some other color, but I kind of like having the walls in my office bright white. It makes it feel open and nice, so I'm not going to paint them. The other thing to think about is what is your endpoint going to be, or what format do you want to send? So like if I was planning to go live exclusively to Instagram, I would need this to be a vertical set. I would orient everything in the room differently. Because I'm going live to YouTube, I'm doing a horizontal set. You can still turn your phone sideways and see me, but computer people can rarely turn their laptop 90 degrees to see it vertically. So I generally endorse the horizontal landscape aspect ratio. But don't be afraid to shoot vertical, especially if your audience is primarily on mobile, or if you're going live from your phone using Facebook, then just treat it like a phone and hold it vertically, and that can be fine. The thing that matters is what are your endpoints going to be doing. If your endpoint's going to be vertical, then shoot a vertical video. If your endpoint is going to be mixed, then shoot a horizontal video. So those are those pieces. Sorry, I'm checking my notes. I'm starting to get a little mentally drained here. We've been doing this for almost an hour, but there's lots of good information. Hopefully you're still tracking with me and learning lots. Yeah, so let's just talk about putting the pieces together, and then that pretty much wraps us for the day. Putting the pieces together. Your endpoints need to influence your inputs. We just talked about the aspect ratio. Does it need to be vertical or does it need to be horizontal? You also want to consider how big is the screen that they're going to look at. If someone's watching you on their phone and you're trying to show them something really detailed, if I'm this far away from you on a phone and I'm like, you can read on the remote what it says, you're not going to be able to read that on your phone anyway because it's going to be so dang small. So if you need people on a phone to be able to see details, then use a really wide angle lens so that you can hold the phone here and get those results. Now, if you are looking at, stabilization. Let's talk about stabilization. You need to mount your camera to something. It can be mounted to a table, like this one is just sitting on a table. That would get me a stable shot. I could even angle it by propping it up on a random something sitting around. You could mount it to a tripod. You could mount it to a monopod. You're looking for some kind of stabilization. I don't think a gimbal like this is going to be a good job or a good tool for live streaming because a gimbal like that is balanced very specifically. And if you have a cable coming out the side of your camera going to a computer or to a switcher, then that cable is going to off balance it every time it moves. So I wouldn't worry about gimbals. I would look into monopods or tripods. If you're looking for cheap tripods, you can literally just Google them. They're all about the same. I'll find one here for you just so we've got it. Let's just look up Amazon Basics tripod, and any of these is fine. So here's a $16 tripod that will work just fine for you. That doesn't mean that all tripods are created equal. It just means that you can get by with anything. If you want to invest in live streaming moving forward, then it's worth looking for a better tripod. Companies like Manfrotto make really good tripods. iFootage makes really good tripods and monopods, so they're worth considering. If you want it to be really dramatic, like an interview that's, maybe they're telling a testimonial that's really deep or something, then think about your lighting and how that relates. And if you don't want it to be dramatic, think about that too. It all matters. And lastly, think about how critical audio quality is. If you're updating someone from the field and you're only going to be there for 35 seconds, then people are going to be more forgiving of, it's phone audio because they're out on the street and he's doing something and just letting us know. If you are in a studio like this one, people are not very forgiving of audio quality. It's pretty important to make that stuff sound and look good. So those are the pieces. Are there any questions? I've got like 3 minutes here before it's 5 o'clock, and if there aren't any questions, that's totally okay. I get it. You might come back to this later. And if you do have questions, still leave them as a comment because I will absolutely get back to these on Friday when I mostly am focusing on Q&A. We'll talk about endpoints, but they're interspersed the whole way throughout this because at every step you need to consider the endpoint. So when we get to those on Friday, I'll take questions as well. Doesn't look like there are any today, which is a-okay. Thank you for investing in your craft. Nonprofits and cause-based organizations have literally never been as important as they are right now in this very moment during, the quarantine and the tense political situation and everything else that's going on in the world. It is people like you who are moving humanity forward when it is so focused on infighting. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for investing in the way you do it. And just like last time, I'll see you next time.